The dense jungles of Costa Rica stretched endlessly before him, the air thick with humidity and the smell of damp earth. John Carter, a determined archaeologist, adjusted his backpack, wiping sweat from his brow. His deep brown eyes, tired but sharp, scanned the horizon as he stepped onto the uneven trail, knowing that the answers to the mystery he had been chasing for years were just beyond his reach. The stone spheres, with their perfect symmetry, had baffled experts for decades. Carter believed they were more than just a curiosity. But Carter brushed these warnings aside. He had never been one to believe in myths or folklore. Yet, as he ventured further into the jungle, something shifted in the air. The atmosphere felt charged, as if the trees themselves were watching him. He couldn't explain it, but a sense of unease began to gnaw at him. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The moment that would either confirm his theory or prove him wrong. He pushed forward, determination set in his chest, unaware of the dangers lurking in the shadows, waiting to disrupt his quest for the truth. As John Carter ventured deeper into the jungle, the dense undergrowth seemed to grow thicker, almost as if the forest itself was resisting his intrusion. The silence was almost deafening, broken only by the distant calls of wildlife and the crunch of leaves beneath his boots. He knew he was getting closer to the site, the place where the stone spheres had been found all those years ago. His heart quickened as the thrill of discovery took hold. He wasn't just here to solve a mystery, he was here to rewrite history. But the deeper he went, the more unsettled he became. The trees here were older, gnarled and twisted, as though they had witnessed things no one alive could understand. John Carter's instincts told him that the answers he sought would come at a great cost, perhaps more than he was prepared to pay. After hours of trekking through the oppressive heat and thick vegetation, John Carter finally reached the site. He paused, looking out over the clearing where the stone spheres lay scattered in disarray. As he walked closer, he knelt by one of the stones, his fingers grazing its cool surface. A strange energy pulsed through him as his hand touched it, sending a ripple of unease up his spine. He didn't believe in the supernatural, but there was something undeniably unusual about these stones. He had to know more. The deeper he looked into their origins, the more questions arose. How had they been made? Why were they placed here? And most importantly, why had no one been able to solve the riddle? His mind raced with theories, but he was no closer to the truth. Yet, a part of him knew that he was standing on the precipice of something much larger than just an archaeological mystery. John Carter stood up slowly, wiping the sweat from his brow. He hadn't expected to find so much mystery in these stones. The pattern in which they were arranged seemed deliberate, almost like an ancient puzzle waiting to be solved. He pulled out a small, worn notebook from his backpack, flipping through pages of sketches and notes he had made in preparation for this moment. As he traced the symbols in his notebook, he felt a chill despite the heat of the jungle. Could these spheres be connected to that legend? Or were they something else entirely? There was no concrete evidence to prove it, but John Carter couldn't shake the feeling that the answer was just within his grasp. As the sun began to set, casting an orange glow across the jungle, John Carter felt a presence behind him. He turned quickly, his hand instinctively reaching for the compass attached to his belt. But there was nothing, no person, no sound, just the silent hum of the jungle. Shaking off the feeling, he returned to his task, but the sensation of being watched lingered. He had come here to find answers, but now he felt as if he was on the verge of unlocking something much bigger. The weight of the mystery was becoming too much to bear, and he realized that the answers would not come easily. The jungle was guarding its secrets, and the cost of uncovering them might be greater than he had anticipated. The hours spent combing through the jungle's thick foliage had finally paid off. John Carter had uncovered a series of old, weathered inscriptions carved into the trunks of towering trees near the stone spheres. His fingers brushed over the strange symbols, each one more intricate than the last. These markings were not of any known civilization, not even the ancient indigenous tribes of Costa Rica. The patterns were unmistakably foreign, alien in nature. It was clear that someone, or something, had been here long before humans had even set foot in these parts. The inscriptions didn't just tell a story, they warned of a great power, one that had been sealed away for a reason. As John Carter carefully sketched the symbols into his notebook, a shiver ran down his spine. Was this the breakthrough he had been waiting for? Or had he uncovered something that should have stayed hidden? The thought of uncovering such an ancient secret was exhilarating. There was something more to this mystery, something he was still too blind to see. The air grew heavier as John Carter continued his exploration. The deeper he ventured into the jungle, the more the oppressive silence seemed to take hold. He could feel eyes on him, though there was no one around. The trees seemed to close in on him, their gnarled branches reaching out like twisted fingers. The strange markings had led him to a new discovery, a cave hidden behind a thick veil of vines. As he approached it, the sensation of being watched intensified. His heart pounded in his chest. He had been so focused on the stones and their mystery. There was a presence here, something ancient and powerful. The cave's entrance loomed ahead, dark and inviting, but also foreboding. Despite the fear gnawing at him, John Carter stepped forward. His thirst for answers outweighed the growing sense of danger. But as he took another step, something caught his eye, an ancient artifact, half buried in the ground. His instincts told him this was the key to unlocking the truth behind the stones. Inside the cave, the air was thick and musty, the scent of wet stone overpowering. John Carter crouched next to the ancient artifact, brushing away dirt and moss. The object was small, cylindrical, and made of a smooth metallic material. Its surface was etched with the same symbols he had found on the trees. His breath quickened as he realized that this was the key he had been searching for. The symbols pulsed with an eerie light, casting long shadows on the stone floor. They seemed to be alive, shifting and changing as if reacting to his presence. John Carter froze, his heart pounding in his chest. Was this just another trick of the light, or was something far more sinister at work? The answers he sought were becoming more elusive, the stakes higher than ever. He had to know what the symbols meant, but first he had to get out of the cave alive. As John Carter emerged from the cave, the jungle seemed to close in around him. The sense of being watched was now overwhelming, and his every step felt like it was being scrutinized. The sky had darkened, the clouds gathering in thick, swirling masses. The weather had shifted suddenly, and the air felt electric, charged with a strange energy. John Carter glanced over his shoulder, convinced he had seen movement in the trees. Was it just his imagination, or was someone, or something, following him? He quickened his pace, the jungle now feeling like a labyrinth, the path twisting and turning in ways he hadn't remembered. The artifact in his bag felt heavier with each step. His mind raced with questions. What was the significance of the artifact? Why did the symbols react to his presence? And who or what was following him? The jungle seemed to close in on him, and he realized that the answers he sought could come at a much greater cost than he was prepared for. The storm broke as John Carter stumbled through the jungle, the rain falling in sheets, drenching him to the bone. His breathing was heavy, his heart racing as the sound of thunder echoed through the jungle. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was following him. His instinct screamed that he was not alone. The trees seemed to whisper, their branches creaking in the wind. He pressed on, his mind focused on the path ahead, the flickering light from his flashlight illuminating the way. But as the rain poured down harder, the path began to disappear, swallowed by the floodwaters rising around him. In the distance he could hear the unmistakable sound of footsteps, not his own but someone, or something, close behind. John Carter spun around, his heart in his throat, but there was nothing there. The jungle was silent once again, save for the sound of the storm. The sense of danger had never been more real, and he knew that whatever was out there was getting closer. The storm had passed by morning, but the jungle felt different, heavier, as if it had been irrevocably changed by the events of the night. John Carter woke early, the previous day's exhaustion weighing on him, but his mind was sharp, restless. The artifact he had found, now safely stowed in his bag, burned with a sense of urgency. He could feel its weight, both physically and metaphorically, as if it held the key to unlocking something far greater than he had originally realized. The strange symbols, the eerie feeling of being followed, the hidden cave, it was all starting to make sense. But it was also becoming more dangerous. The deeper he ventured into the jungle, the more the mysteries seemed to grow. John Carter felt the walls of his understanding closing in around him. Every clue led to more questions, and each discovery felt like a step closer to the truth. But what was that truth? And who was he really meant to uncover it for? He was no longer sure if he could trust his instincts. But there was no turning back now. He had to press on. As the sun rose higher in the sky, he set off again, his eyes scanning the jungle for any sign of what was to come. As John Carter made his way deeper into the jungle, the path became more treacherous. The lush vegetation had given way to rocky outcroppings and steep inclines, making every step more difficult than the last. He had spent the entire day navigating this unforgiving terrain, but he was getting closer. He could feel it. He had stumbled upon more of the markings, faint symbols etched into the rocks along the path, their meaning still unclear. But one thing was certain, they led him here, to this hidden part of the jungle. Every so often, John Carter would glance over his shoulder, but he never saw anything. Still, the sense of danger was real. As he climbed another rock face, he spotted something ahead, an ancient temple, partially buried under vines and moss. It was more than just ruins. It felt alive, as though the place had been waiting for him. He knew then that the truth lay within. When John Carter reached the temple, he was breathless, both from the climb and the overwhelming sense of awe that had settled over him. The stone structure loomed before him, its surfaces worn and weathered by time, but it was still magnificent. He ran his fingers over the carvings on the door, each one mirroring the symbols he had seen before, the same markings that had haunted him since his arrival. There was no mistaking it now. The temple was linked to the stones and the artifact he had found. He had come here to uncover the truth, but now, standing in front of the temple, he felt unsure. Was he ready to face whatever was hidden inside? The questions that plagued him only intensified. The truth was close, but would it destroy him to find it? Stepping cautiously inside, John Carter felt the temperature drop. The air was stale, filled with the scent of ancient stone and forgotten secrets. The interior of the temple was vast, with high ceilings supported by massive stone pillars. The walls were lined with more carvings, each one depicting scenes of long-forgotten rituals, some of which seemed almost alien in their otherworldliness. As he ventured deeper into the temple, he noticed something strange. The carvings on the walls seemed to move, shifting and changing, almost as if they were alive. John Carter stopped dead in his tracks. It was impossible, yet undeniable. The symbols were no longer static. They were reacting to his presence. It was as though the temple itself was responding to him. His heart pounded in his chest. The mystery he had been chasing for so long was finally unraveling, but what he was about to uncover might be more than he could handle. The question now was not what the temple held, but what price he would have to pay for the truth. The temple seemed to breathe around him, the walls pulsing with an energy he couldn't understand. John Carter moved slowly, his eyes darting from one symbol to the next, trying to make sense of what was happening. The light from his flashlight flickered as if the battery was dying, but it wasn't the battery. Something inside the temple was draining it. Panic began to rise in his chest, but he couldn't stop now. The temple was alive, and it was not happy that he had come. John Carter had just unlocked something far more dangerous than he could have ever anticipated. As John Carter stepped away from the altar, the temple seemed to shift around him. The ground rumbled once more, and a deep resonant hum filled the air. He looked around, feeling the weight of the discovery settling on him. The relic, glowing with an almost unnatural light, pulsed in his hands, its power undeniable. His heart raced. The temple had come to life in ways he never expected. He knew that the stone spheres, the markings, the artifact, all of it was tied to this place, this ancient power. But why? What was the purpose of all this? As the realization struck, John Carter felt a deep sense of dread. This power was not meant to be disturbed. He had come for answers, but now he was beginning to understand that those answers might be too dangerous to bear. John Carter had unlocked something much greater than he had anticipated, and as the temple's shifting walls closed in, he knew that whatever happened next would change everything. Suddenly, John Carter heard a voice, a whisper, almost inaudible, coming from deep within the temple. He spun around, his breath catching in his throat. The voice was distant, but it carried with it a sense of urgency and desperation. The walls of the temple seemed to groan under the pressure of something unseen, and John Carter felt his pulse quicken. He wasn't alone. The voice beckoned him, urging him deeper into the heart of the temple, and against his better judgment, he obeyed. Every step he took echoed in the silent, oppressive darkness, and the whispers grew louder, more insistent. The path ahead twisted and turned, and John Carter realized that the temple was not just a structure. It was a maze, a labyrinth designed to keep its secrets hidden. He felt as though he were being led by an unseen hand, but part of him questioned whether he was walking into a trap. The deeper he went, the more he realized that there were forces at play here far beyond his understanding. The further John Carter ventured, the more the walls seemed to close in on him. The passageway was now so narrow that he had to move sideways to progress. The whispers were no longer distant but seemed to come from every direction, surrounding him, pressing in. He could hear words now, though they were fragmented and indistinct, as if they were speaking directly into his mind. John Carter stopped, his breath shallow as a sense of terror began to settle over him. The walls were covered with inscriptions, and as he stepped closer to them, he realized they were warnings of a terrible, forgotten power sealed away by the ancient civilization that had created the temple. These markings told of a ritual, one meant to keep the power locked away for all eternity. The voice in his mind grew louder, urging him to reach the heart of the temple. John Carter emerged into a massive chamber, the largest he had seen so far. The floor was made of smooth stone, covered in dust and debris, and in the center of the room stood a large stone pedestal. On it lay an ancient object, glowing with an eerie blue light. John Carter felt a pull toward it, an overwhelming urge to approach. As he stepped forward, the temperature in the room dropped, and the shadows seemed to lengthen. The voice in his mind intensified, now urgent, almost pleading. He had come this far. He couldn't turn back now. But as he reached out to touch the glowing object, the air around him seemed to shimmer, and the room filled with an unnatural silence. The ground beneath his feet trembled once again, and for a brief moment, John Carter saw something, an image, a vision. A civilization, long extinct, offering the object to an unseen force. It was clear now. The moment John Carter touched the glowing object, the temple seemed to come alive with violent force. The ground shook beneath him, and a deafening roar filled the air, as if the very earth were protesting his actions. The walls of the temple cracked and splintered, and the sky outside darkened, clouds swirling in a violent storm. John Carter stumbled back, the object now glowing brighter than ever before. The voice in his mind became a scream, angry, desperate, as if warning him of the consequences of his actions. But it was too late. The ancient power had been awakened. The temple's defenses, once dormant, were now active. John Carter realized that the object was not just a key, it was a catalyst, and the moment he had touched it, the world had shifted. There was no turning back now. As the storm raged outside, he knew that the secrets he had uncovered had set something terrible in motion. The temple was shaking uncontrollably now, its ancient foundations groaning under the immense force of the unleashed power. John Carter staggered back, clutching the pedestal for support as the ground beneath him trembled violently. The light from the glowing relic flickered in time with the convulsing temple, casting harsh, chaotic shadows across the walls. His heart raced as he tried to process what was happening. The relic, the key, had triggered something deep within the temple, something that had been dormant for centuries. But what was it? The ancient civilization that had built this place had clearly known the dangers. The markings, the inscriptions, the warnings, they were all meant to keep the power contained. John Carter had unwittingly set it free, and now there was no turning back. He had to get out before it was too late. But the exit seemed miles away. John Carter turned, panic rising in his chest as the walls around him shifted, seemingly closing in. He had to find an exit. His breath was ragged, and his mind raced. Every step felt like a race against time as the temple continued to tremble, its walls shifting and grinding against each other. The strange markings on the stone seemed to change before his eyes, the symbols now glowing ominously. It was clear now that the temple had been designed as a prison, but for what? And why had he, of all people, been chosen to release whatever it was? John Carter paused, his eyes darting to the back of the chamber, where a large arched doorway had just appeared, almost as if it had materialized from thin air. The voice in his mind spoke again, now urgent. "It is coming, run." He didn't hesitate. There was no time for second guesses. John Carter sprinted toward the doorway, feeling the walls shift behind him, as if the temple itself was trying to trap him inside. The shadows seemed to stretch and grow longer, the temple alive with energy, with something that wanted him to stay, to never leave. John Carter burst through the archway into a narrow hallway, his footsteps echoing in the silence. The walls of the passage were smooth, almost metallic, and the air was colder here, the temperature dropping as he moved deeper. The voice in his mind grew louder, now frantic. "You've disturbed it. You've awakened the guardian. It will not let you leave." His heart raced, his chest tightening with each step. He didn't know what the guardian was, but he could feel its presence closing in around him. The walls seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy, and the hallway began to narrow, the passage closing in on him. John Carter could hear something behind him, a faint scratching like claws on stone. His breath came in shallow gasps as the fear intensified. He had to find a way out. He had to get back to the surface. But no matter how fast he ran, the hallway seemed endless, stretching out in front of him, pulling him deeper into the unknown. Suddenly, the hallway opened into a vast chamber, the air heavy with dust and darkness. John Carter stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes widening as he took in the sight before him. The chamber was unlike any space he had seen in the temple. At its center stood a massive statue, tall, imposing, and carved from black stone. Its eyes, though lifeless, seemed to follow him as he moved. The guardian, he realized. The creature or force that had been sealed away long ago. The relic, the markings, the power, it was all a trap, a mechanism to awaken this entity. As John Carter stepped forward, the air seemed to crackle with energy, and the statue's stone eyes glowed faintly. The voice in his mind was now a roar, urging him to flee. "You cannot stop it. It will destroy you." But John Carter couldn't turn back now. He had come this far. As he reached the base of the statue, he felt a presence, an immense power, growing stronger. The guardian was awakening, and there was no escape. The ground beneath John Carter trembled once again, the air now thick with an oppressive force. He could feel the guardian's power rising, the stone statue beginning to shift, its massive form coming to life. John Carter stepped back in fear, his heart pounding in his chest. The voice in his mind screamed at him to run, but it was too late. The guardian's eyes glowed brighter, and the room filled with an unbearable pressure, as if the weight of centuries was pressing down on him. The statue moved, slowly, but with an undeniable power. John Carter's mind raced as he tried to make sense of what was happening. The relic, the artifact, was the key to stopping it, he realized. But how? The statue's massive stone hand reached out toward him, and in that moment, he knew that the only way to survive was to destroy what he had awakened. John Carter ran toward the pedestal where the relic had been placed, determined to find a way to stop the guardian before it was too late. The temple shook violently as John Carter sprinted back toward the pedestal, his heart pounding in his chest. The guardian's stone hand reached toward him, and the very air seemed to crackle with energy. John Carter could feel the immense power radiating from the statue, and a terrifying realization set in. He had to stop it, but he had no idea how. The relic, the artifact that had triggered all of this, was now in his hands, its glow intensified. John Carter's mind raced as he desperately tried to recall any clue that might help him. The symbols, the warnings, everything pointed to this moment, but the pieces of the puzzle were still out of reach. He had studied ancient civilizations, but nothing had prepared him for this. His thoughts were interrupted by a deafening roar that reverberated through the temple as the Guardian's eyes blazed brighter. John Carter knew that the relic was the key to controlling the Guardian, but what did he need to do? Time was running out. The temple was collapsing around him, the walls cracking and splintering. As the pressure in the room mounted, John Carter's mind raced for any solution. He had no choice but to act quickly. The voice in his mind, the same voice that had warned him earlier, was now growing frantic. "You must return it. Return the relic, or all will be lost." John Carter was beginning to understand. The relic had been a key, one that had unlocked the Guardian's prison, but it wasn't just a key to the past. It was the only thing that could seal the temple once more. The only thing that could stop the Guardian. With the relic in hand, he ran toward the altar, where the glowing object had once rested. But the statue wasn't making it easy. Every step felt like he was being pulled backward, the weight of the ancient force growing stronger. The stone walls closed in, the cracks widening, and the Guardian's hand moved closer, its massive fingers reaching out as if to crush him. John Carter couldn't waste any more time. He had to reach the altar and return the relic before the Guardian was fully awakened. His survival, and possibly the fate of the world, depended on it. As John Carter neared the altar, a horrifying realization struck him. He couldn't return the relic without first facing the Guardian. The statue's massive stone hand reached down toward him, and in that instant, he knew that he had no choice but to fight. John Carter's heart raced as he lifted the relic high, the glowing light shining like a beacon in the dark chaos of the collapsing temple. The Guardian's eyes flared with a malevolent energy, and the roar of its power filled the chamber. The room trembled with force, and for a moment, John Carter thought he might be swallowed by the stone itself. But he held his ground, the relic glowing brighter than ever before. He could feel the temple's pulse beneath his feet, could feel the magic of the ancient world coursing through the relic. John Carter knew he had to make a stand. The relic was the key, but it was also the weapon. If he could focus its energy just right, he might be able to force the Guardian back into the depths of the temple and seal it away forever. The energy from the relic surged through John Carter, a raw force that nearly knocked him off his feet. He could feel the Guardian's power resisting him, but the relic was stronger. The stone statue's eyes flashed with fury, and its stone hand slammed toward him, the force of the strike powerful enough to crack the floor beneath him. John Carter gritted his teeth and pushed back with everything he had. The temple shook with one final violent tremor, but John Carter held his ground. When the dust settled, the temple was still. The stone statue had frozen, its massive hand suspended in midair. The voice in his mind, now calm and silent, seemed to acknowledge his victory. The relic had done its job. The Guardian was sealed once again, but at what cost? John Carter didn't know if he could ever truly leave the temple the same way he entered. The weight of what he had done hung heavily on him. As John Carter made his way toward the exit, the temple seemed to sigh in relief, the rumblings and tremors finally subsiding. The walls no longer shook, and the air had returned to a heavy stillness. He had succeeded, but at what cost? The relic, now dull and lifeless in his hand, had served its purpose, but it was clear that the power it had contained had been far more than he was prepared to handle. John Carter had seen the destruction the Guardian could bring, and he knew that he could never allow such a force to be unleashed again. The jungle outside seemed peaceful in contrast to the chaos he had just experienced. John Carter stepped into the daylight, the air fresh with the scent of rain and the dense greenery. He looked back at the temple, now silent, its ancient power sealed once again. But he knew that the secrets of this place would remain with him forever. What had he truly uncovered? Was he the hero who saved the world, or the fool who nearly destroyed it? The jungle was quiet now, almost too quiet. The storm had passed, and the chaos that had once consumed the temple seemed to have dissipated with the morning light. John Carter stood at the edge of the clearing, his eyes fixed on the ancient structure behind him. The relic was gone, its power sealed back in the temple, its secrets buried once more. For a moment he felt the weight of everything that had happened. The relentless search for truth, the terrifying discovery of the Guardian, and the ancient power that he had nearly unleashed upon the world. He had saved it, but at what cost? The jungle seemed peaceful, but John Carter knew better. There was no going back to the life he once knew. The relic had revealed far more than he had ever bargained for. He had touched something far beyond his understanding, and it had left its mark on him. With every step he took away from the temple, he felt the weight of the burden he now carried. What had he truly learned? Was the world better off with the secrets of the temple hidden forever? John Carter wasn't sure. As John Carter walked away from the temple, the quiet of the jungle seemed to envelop him, but the questions continued to echo in his mind. Who had built the temple, and why had they chosen to seal away such unimaginable power? The markings, the relic, the Guardian, it was all part of something much larger than he had ever realized. He reached a small stream, the water gently flowing over the rocks, and paused to rest. His eyes drifted over the landscape, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the temple had left its mark on him, that something, someone, was watching him, even now. As he rested by the stream, the voice that had spoken to him in the temple returned, calm, yet foreboding. The world will always seek the truth, but some truths should never be found. John Carter didn't know if he would ever find peace. The answers he had uncovered had changed him forever, and no matter how far he walked, the echoes of the temple would follow him. As the day wore on, John Carter continued his journey back through the jungle. The path seemed longer now, the once familiar surroundings now unfamiliar and suffocating. Every sound, every rustle in the leaves, made him look over his shoulder, as if the Guardian or something worse was waiting to catch up with him. The jungle had changed, and so had he. Perhaps he wasn't ready for them either. John Carter knew that if the truth were to be exposed, it would come at a great cost. The power that had once been sealed away in the temple could never be allowed to fall into the wrong hands. He had destroyed the relic, but part of him knew that this was only a temporary solution. There was always the risk that someone else would come along, someone who would awaken the power again. The world was full of secrets, and some of them were better left buried. By evening, John Carter had reached the edge of the jungle. The dense trees gave way to open fields, and for the first time in days, he felt the cool breeze on his face. But the peace was fleeting. The voice in his mind, the voice of the temple, echoed once more. You cannot escape it. The power you awakened will follow you. It will always find its way back. John Carter stopped in his tracks, his heart racing. The realization hit him like a bolt of lightning. He had left the temple behind, but the temple had never truly left him. The relic, the power, it was all part of him now. John Carter couldn't escape it. He had crossed a line, and there was no going back. As he stood in the open field, the feeling of being watched intensified. Was it the temple, or was it something else? Something he could never escape? He didn't know. But he knew that this was only the beginning of his journey, not the end. The truth had been unearthed, and with it, a new chapter in his life had begun, one that would be shaped by the ancient power he had awakened. As the sun dipped below the horizon, John Carter continued walking, the weight of the ancient power still pressing on his mind. He had done everything he could to stop it, but he knew that some things were beyond his control. The world would always seek out the secrets of the past, no matter how dangerous they were. And now he was part of that history, whether he wanted to be or not. He couldn't undo what he had done, but perhaps in some small way, he could control how the story ended. John Carter paused and looked back at the jungle, the place that had changed him forever. The relic may have been destroyed, but the power was still out there, waiting for someone to awaken it once more. John Carter didn't know what his future held, But one thing was clear: the secrets of the temple would never leave him. He had become its guardian whether he liked it or not. And as the jungle faded behind him, he stepped into the unknown, ready for whatever came next.